Alright, welcome to part 1 of Animation 101. We're going to go over various things like the viewports, timeline, the time range, setting keys, auto keys, curve editors, and types of curves. These videos are meant to be short and sweet so you can get the information you need and not listen through 10 hours of me running my mouth. So first we'll start with the viewport. This right here would be the viewport. There's many kinds of viewports. You can click on the side here to get all your options. Press spacebar and it'll jump you to your last option of viewports. You can go toggle back and forth, and if you have your cursor in one window and press spacebar, it'll go to that window. You press spacebar, go back to the 4 viewports. If I have my cursor in this window, it'll pop back to that window. That comes very handy when you have a shot and you need to look at all 4 views for the top sides. You can click on those to make quick zooms of your viewports to get close-ups. So with that, within the viewports, you have right on top, you got view, shading, lighting, show, renders, and panels. Those are various tools you can use, which some of those options are right up here, which comes in handy. Like here, you have your grid, which comes in handy, but when you are on your, say, a side view, you have all this grid, you want to get rid of all the negative space, or you just want to get rid of the grid, you can go to show, and this has all of the little nuances that will be within that can be shown when they're created. And right now you have a grid, which is located down here. If I click this, the grid's gone. That viewport, don't have to worry about the grid. And you can do the same with all the other viewports if you don't want the grid. And this goes for other things such as nerve curves, surfaces, mortar curves, polygons. For the most part, for animation, I will click none, show, click poly, and curves. And that'll be for the most part, that's all you would really need for animation, because 90% of the rigs are made with curves and obviously with polygons. So moving on, for animation, here's your timeline, which is something that modelers, they can use, lighting you can use, but for the most part, this is an animation tool that is used widely. So within the timeline, you have various things. You have your time range, which can be used at the very front, the very first option box here. If you press 2, that will change where your time range actually starts. And this bar right here is a time slider, and you can adjust the time within the 2 very end boxes, channel boxes, of where to go as far as how many frames. If I want my frames to be 23 frames, it's 23. There's 2. So with that, I would also like to jump into this, considering with the timeline, is also your animation time slider. And this little button right here is your preference, which will let you preference for almost everything. But the biggest things I want you guys to focus on will be time slider, which you can set your real time. Film, they use 24 frames. For games, we use 30. For most of the stuff I do, I use 30 frames per second. It's just a natural thing. But most film is 24 frames, and there's even some games are not 60 frames. But for the purposes of this class, we'll be having it at 30 frames. And if you go into settings, you get into more granular stuff, and your NTSA is at 30 frames. So the biggest thing is always make sure this is either at 30 frames or 24 frames, depending on what the instructor wants you to have it at or what your assignment is. This animation tab right here is mostly not used widely. I normally leave this alone, but you do have the auto key option right here, which we'll jump into here in a bit. So with the time, this is the timeline which you'll be doing most of your animations in. So the biggest thing I need to do is create an object so I can demonstrate setting keys and how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and create me an object. So here's a sphere, and then with this sphere, I can have it do several things. I'm going to put it in a side view, put it right here, use this as my ground plane. But with this object, I can press S with it selected, and it will set a key. Now, one of the crucial things to know about is your channel box. The channel box has all the information that any object that you select and any object that the rigger will put on an object, which can be various things like um, a toggle for squash and stretch, a toggle for, or even things where scale, because most of the time scale you won't use, will not be in there. So it will just have the basic stuff you'll need. So with this one, I set a key and it set a key on all the attributes. Now the way to get to your channel box was most of the time when you open up my channel box, it's stuck to the side of your screen. But this icon right here will turn on and off your channel box. And this is very, very important as well. So with the channel box open, you can move the time slider down to say frame 9, press S again, and it'll set another key. And what that does is set keys on all these objects. So if I go in between frame 2 and frame 9, which I have keys on, and I move this object, it's going to set a key because I have this thing called the auto key. Auto key is very important. If you see this and you start moving this around and you move your time slider, it's not gonna take any of that information. The only way it will take that information if you move without this object on, without the key selected, and I move it over here, is if I press S again, and then it will recognize that it moved to that location. Otherwise, if you move this around without the auto key on, it will not. That information will not be used. If you have the auto key on, what this will allow you to do is to allow you to move an object, and it will set, and it will gather that information and move it with whatever you move it at. So it will basically keep that position that you moved it to. But here's the catch. I'm going to delete all these keys to show you from fresh here. Alright, so what I did here is now I got a key here. I want to set a key here. And then I want to have this go up. It's going to go up and it's going to go down. Now here's the thing. I set a key on this, which puts a key on all my channel box areas, and set a key on key 9, which sets a key on all my channel box things. So if I go to rotate, if I want to rotate on frame 9, but on frame 6 I didn't want it to rotate, but it's rotating. The reason that is happening because on frame 6 I didn't set a key, which will set a key on all my attributes. So if I go back, Control Z, and I set a key on frame 6, and then go to frame 9 and then start to rotate it, notice it'll rotate on frame 6, it'll go up, and then it'll start rotating after frame 6. And that's the one thing about auto key. And so whenever time I move an object and say I wanted to rotate or do something to that object, if it's not set on the previous key, it will rotate all through all the keys that you set or that you use with the auto key, because auto key only sets a key on the objects you actually move. So if I'm at frame 17 and I move and I rotate, it's only setting a key on the rotate, not the translation. Only on rotate. So on frame 23, if I move it down on frame 17, it will be moving down. It will see, because it's starting from frame 13 through 23 to start moving down. Before on frame 17 it was up here, but since I moved it over here and didn't set a key on 17, it started to move down. So that's how auto key works. It's very important. And now I can show you another thing that's highly used, and I'll briefly mention it and dive more into it when we do the next part. But it's the curve editor. And the way you can find the curve editor is you go to Windows, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. I keep saying curve editor because it has all the curves and it's a graph, but it's a graph. Anyways, so with the curve editor, this basically has all the information that you used moving objects. And here's another example how I can show how the auto key works. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all these keys. Here's my first key. Frame 9, I set a key. This is all translation right here. I'm gonna highlight all these, so now I got my rotates and my translation. So at frame 6, I'm just going to translate up. So what this does is it moves my green, which is translation up, or my y-axis, which is up. But if you notice, it does not set a key on anything else. FYI, if you select anything, whether it's in a viewport or in a curve editor, and press F, it will frame everything. Very useful. Try not to forget that. F frames everything. So when you lose something but you have it selected, press F, it will put it in there. So if you notice, it only set a key on that y-axis, not even on the x or the z, only on the y. No rotates at all. And that's an example of, now if I start rotating at frame 9, but I didn't want it to rotate at all, if I wanted to rotate from frame 5 to frame 9, but not from frame 2, it's going to rotate, because when I rotated on frame 9, it has no keys in between there, so it rotated with it. So that's a little bit how the curve editor is sort of works.